If you don't know, the Yukon is east of Alaska and comprises about 480,000 square kilometers or 185,000 square miles with a population of only 45,000 people. Now, the reason I point that out is that our guest has carved out a really important role in the ecosystem of nonprofits, small business, and governments in the social innovation space in that kind of environment, which you can imagine has some pretty significant challenges to it. So Wendy Morrison is the founder of YZ Projects in the Yukon Territory in Northern Canada, and she has some very interesting stories to tell. Wendy, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
So nice to have you here. So just as I always do, as people who listen know this, I always ask my guests right off the top for one piece of advice they may give someone who's wanting to do some good in the world through their business, just because not everybody can hang out through the entire podcast. So I'd like them to get value right out of the gate if they can. So what, given your experience, because you've got a really interesting perspective working in those three different sectors in such a, spread out kind of environment, what insights do you have?
I would say there's two things for me. One is do what you love, because then you are just excited to, get up each day and kind of see what it brings. And the other is to be adaptable because it is an always evolving landscape, both for my business, my team, my clients, and the community that we're serving. So we've had to be really adaptable often, and that has served us well.
Now, you're not the first one to have said, do what you love as a driving force. The adaptability one. So what can you talk a little more about that? What does that look like? Does it mean adaptable of your business model or just how you interact with clients or everything?
I think everything. I mean, we started our business very shortly before COVID started. So that landscape changed considerably. In some ways, that actually was a benefit because it brought our nonprofit organizations online more than they ever had been before. So that allowed me to have a team that worked all across Canada, helping put programs together and do that training and service to the clients. So that was actually really great for us. And we also saw that our nonprofit organizations were busier than ever and really, kind of struggling. So a lot of their challenges really came to the forefront. And it was the first time that collectively the governments and the sector were talking about what those challenges were and how chronic they have been.
So what does YZ do and who does it do it for?
Yeah, so we're a social innovation company and we focus on nonprofit organizations and rural small businesses, mostly women-led. And we provide coaching, training, planning work, and that really takes the shape of very different things. So sometimes we come in when an organization is looking to grow or take on a big project. Sometimes that means we come in when an organization is in crisis or really challenged and looking for support in how they can kind of navigate those challenges. And so it looks a little different every day. In terms of the work, and some organizations we've been working with on and off for over 5 years, and others we just come in and we work very closely with them for a few months and wrap up our project.
And so can you give an example of a project? Because nonprofits and project work on strategy, that's a big bucket. Can you give just an example of what that might look like?
Yeah, so in one case, we had an anti-poverty organization that was taking on a huge funding pot to disperse federal funds for work on homelessness. And they just didn't have the systems in place to kind of, be able to actually be take on this huge amount of money and have the systems that were required for them as an organization. So I came in and just with, decades of experience working with nonprofits and different funding models, I was able to kind of create the systems that they needed. And then from that, that shorter project, there was a program that they had working on housing that needed to be its own organization because it was growing kind of too big for the organization to kind of house within the existing anti-poverty group. And so I helped kind of launch that nonprofit organization and kind of, just lay out the foundation for kind of getting that organization set up. And I loved that transition. And I've still been working with that organization, doing board training work and again, setting up systems for taking on a big housing project.
Now, I would imagine, just given what we described as the environment to build boards, like I take it from what you just said, part of your work is building board strategies, or do you engage in like board recruitment and board management and all of that?
Yes, absolutely. And it's a really critical piece these days with, as you mentioned, our population is only 45,000. So to house board of directors for over 600 organizations, it's there's a lot of people who have been on multiple boards for many years, but there's also a definite need for new board members to come in, even if they have no experience working with boards. So I do love the recruiting and onboarding and training of new boards. I find that really, really exciting.
Well, it's super important, like for people who haven't had that experience. Like I've been on the boards of, I think 5 different organizations. And a lot of them don't do the onboarding very well. And board members don't know what their obligations are, what the responsibilities are. And sometimes even board members start mucking around in the operations when they're not really supposed to. And people don't understand the difference between governance and operations and that kind of thing, right? So just for people who want, like I imagine, the reason I ask this is a lot of entrepreneurs who might be listening at some point in their life, they want to give back and they get invited to participate on boards. Can you just talk a little bit about what that ideally should look like for somebody who wants to participate?
Yeah. So I really geek out in this area because I think it's really important. And when it's going well, I see how strong organizations can be when their board is actively engaged and people feel like they have a voice around the table and they're having the discussions that they're really meant to be having. So, having, like clear onboarding about like what the roles are and what type of governance, like what type of board it is and how boards come together and make decisions. And I think that gets lost in the shuffle of all of the logistics and details of the organization. But I think it's something that we can't let go of because what we want is that group of, really smart, committed people sitting around having those, discussions and helping be advisors for a team moving through, the challenges of any nonprofit organization. And when that happens, it's actually really magical. People get excited walking away from those meetings where they got to lean into those discussions versus the details of running an organization. So
can you talk a little bit about that distinction though? Like a lot of entrepreneurs being entrepreneurs, right? They're innately problem solvers, right? And so when they get asked to join a board, often they want to muck around, right? Like they want to get into the weeds and say, well, why don't we do it this way? And why don't we do it that way? And how about, and operation people can get their backs up and feel like that's not your job. But sometimes there is expertise there. So how's that tension managed?
I think like clear roles is really important. So even just for new board coming in to understand what each of the staff do, and what their role is in that. And I don't think it has to be, just a checklist on paper. A lot of it is about relationships. And when you've got strong relationships and time to foster those, then you really see where people's strengths can come in. Because we know, again, if you're recruiting very busy, business folks who bring in some really great skills, they want to be used and engaged. And I think that's true of most people joining boards. It's very important for them to feel engaged, and that their skills and voice are valued and valuable to the organization.
Now, with a population, do all your board members, when you do this recruitment work, is it all local, or do you search far, far and wide?
There's definitely some boards who have board members from outside of the territory, but it's a pretty unique environment here. And it is helpful when boards understand the funders and the landscape and the unique challenges of the North. And so sometimes we get those voices from Toronto, and it's really hard to kind of meld those approaches to the ways that things work in an urban center.
Can you, or is it possible? I don't even know if it's possible too, because I've been in environments where there's just that ineffable, ephemeral sort of quality. But when you say it's a unique environment, for people who haven't had the pleasure of being there, what does that mean? Like when you say it's a unique environment?
So again, even in just the number of nonprofit organizations, so there's over 600. So, that's one for every 50 Yukoners. At the same time, there's a lot of talk about the sheer number of nonprofits, but we're like any other, province. There has to be nonprofits that are providing programs and services in housing and mental health and so and sports and rec and all of those teams from juniors to old timers. And so in some ways we don't have less need than any other jurisdiction in terms of the services and programs that we're rolling out. And I would say the Yukon is a very active population, but we have one city that is, about 36,000 people, and the rest are in very small communities. And so those nonprofits are really working with small pools of people who are, again, often on multiple boards, and are seeing things done differently. But I think there is anywhere you go, there's just that local flavor and kind of knowledge of all of those pieces. I mean, even our demographics are, I think, quite unique and they've been surprising to my team members that have come on and kind of gotten information about the landscape. 25% of our population is First Nations. We have a large demographic. About 15% of our population is French speaking. And so it's a very interesting, kind of fascinating makeup. And that local flavor, you see it at all levels, including, kind of the makeup of different board of directors.
And is the community pretty tight? Like, do even these board members, does everyone sort of know each other?
Often, but we're surprised now, like when we get on airplanes, of how many people we don't know. There's a lot of new faces. We are one of the fastest growing populations in Canada, so we're seeing a large influx of new faces every day, and that's exciting as well.
Now, I imagine somebody listening to this, and you don't have to disclose any private numbers or anything, or like on a business model standpoint. I'd imagine if there's 600 nonprofits in a population that small, serving small organizations or small populations, like the financial side of it must be a bit challenging. Just for these organizations to be able to come to you and pay for your services, or are they successful in securing government funds that are just like you're part of the cost structure on the project that they've applied for to the government. Does that, or how does that play out?
Yeah, I would say a large majority of the organizations are finding some sort of project funding, to bring us on to work with for a period of time. And
it's not donor financed.
No, it's not. And some of them are challenged because they would like kind of more long-term support in their work, but the funding models just aren't there yet. So that, that's often kind of a discussion and a challenge, and that exists throughout the sector, no matter where you are. So, one of the discussions that we hear most often is kind of this challenge of the funding structure that is outdated and has not been adaptable to, the many changes facing organizations. And, it's one of the areas that we work on as well, supporting the advocacy work for the sector as it moves forward and tries to adapt to its landscape.
And you also said you work for small businesses, primarily women business owners. What's the nature of that kind of work?
So a lot of the same. So I do a lot of planning and coaching. So I do business planning and feasibility studies for new business ideas. And I really love that because there are some communities where women are just going to transform these communities over the next, 10 to 15 years. And they have amazing, business ideas. And I'm really excited and really, truly want to see them succeed in what they're doing in the community. So
again, with a small population, is it challenging to say, like, is that an intentional, I am focusing my services on women-led businesses, or has that just happened by perchance because you're a woman business owner, or is it like, why not expand those services more broadly to all entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so partly it's capacity for my capacity and just setting priorities for who I want to be working with in the coming year. But I also think that there is there's not a lot of people working with women in a way that engages them in the way that they want to run a business. So I think it is very different for a lot of the women that I work with. They are looking for to have a business, but not for that business to take over their lifestyle for the next 5 years, because they have families, they have other community commitments, and volunteer engagements that they have, and they don't want to let those go. So they really are looking for a business balance. And I really love getting into those discussions and kind of mapping out something that can work, because I think we can do it all. We just have to shift the way in which we do it.
Yeah, there's still lots of challenges that people, I often hear these conversations of, wow, there should be no difference. But when you actually look at like investment portfolios, female entrepreneurs have a much more difficult time getting investment. And even there's studies that have shown just the questions that women entrepreneurs get asked in the investment pitch meetings are very different from the questions that men investors get. And so, yeah, having that kind of support. There's another guest on the podcast that I just interviewed recently, and she's created basically a mentorship incubator model for BIPOC business owners and BIPOC women business owners for that same reason, that there's structural obstacles and just cultural obstacles that other people don't actually know exist until you're in there facing it. And so, are there unique solutions that you bring in the face of that? Or is it providing just traditional business advice for people who don't have access to it? Or are there kind of unique strategies that get applied given what those objectives are that you articulated?
I think, in some ways there's not a huge difference between a nonprofit organization and a social impact, business. And so I think my experience really does kind of, work in both of those worlds. Definitely the revenue sourcing is a little different, but otherwise all of the kind of the systems are, and, when you talk about capacity and resources, it's all the same. And so some of those challenges, again, just comes from, experience of managing budgets and financial projections and, for 20 years, so that, some of those skills can come over. And some of it's been my own experience as a business. So I also entered the business world, and I took part in a business boot camp, a 12-week program, and an incubate program. And I had my own challenges sort of working through my own business growth plans. And I realized that the landscape was just not really set up for what I wanted to do. And so I just shifted how I wanted to set that up. So part of it is just helping businesses navigate within the framework that exists, and finding those streams that work for each individual business.
Okay, you just said something that really piqued my interest, because I love the entrepreneurial thing where you said basically the structures or the way things are done wasn't set up for the way you wanted to do it, but you went ahead and did it. So you shifted a little bit, but I love hearing that it isn't just, well, I can't do this because other people don't do it that way. So there's two questions to this. One is why are you doing this? What got you into it in the first place?
So I was in the nonprofit sector for decades, I was working with a really amazing conservation organization that had an incredible staff, and I didn't really want to leave, but I saw the value in the skills that I have, and there was a lot of demand for it. And so I was constantly around other nonprofits who were just kind of making those requests to find someone who had that skill set. And I realized that there was actually maybe a way that I could create a structure, an operational structure that could work for multiple organizations. And so that was really the dream for me. And it still is what I'm, working towards. I'm just doing it at a different pace because I want to kind of create this, this framework that can be, used as a tool for, dozens and, maybe even hundreds of organizations here. But I also need to work as a business. So I'm just managing my own capacity to kind of develop that. And it's just a little bit of a longer term piece because, the funders don't see the same vision for business growth that I do, and they it's a different pace in the social innovation world, and it's a different model, and so we're just seeing that we're at the beginning of that knowledge and that expertise. We're seeing that investment as well, with the social finance world kind of rolling out and being at its inception. I think we're kind of learning that together. So I've just
What do you mean by that? Like, listeners may not know what that means. What is the social finance world?
Yeah, so I mean, the government of Canada is rolling out a $2 billion social finance fund, and it is to fund investment for businesses that have social impact as one of its its benefits. And so it's not all profit driven, that there's a social impact model kind of embedded in that investment. And we've seen that there's huge interest in that. There's a lot of discussion with investors. There's, women's investment groups that are starting to form and develop. And it's trying to just change up the investment landscape to support, BIPOC and women-led businesses that are just doing things a little differently than a traditional business or a tech company that is looking for, kind of really quick development and then really quick, sale of business for that, kind of that big profit.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you decided to do things a little bit differently, even in the face of what seemed to be an environment that wasn't ready for it. What gave you the confidence that you were able to do that?
I think, just knowing, like working with different, organizations and seeing the need, seeing the response to the work that I'm doing, seeing the demand. And yeah, I mean, I would love to kind of launch off to get my business to that next level of having, a dozen people, working with me and having a whole team of people who can create, this system and structure that's going to support hundreds of organizations. And I feel like I'm slowly making my way there, but I'm not there yet. And again, I think it goes back to the earlier advice of, I just really love what I do, so I'm happy to keep doing it. And I'm, kind of a little more patient now than I was when I first started, about adapting to the pace, because it's new for a lot of people, and so there's some kind of education that's happening collectively and individually, and we just are moving, I think, in a really positive way to look at social innovation and social impact within our framework. So what's next? What's next for your business? Again, expanding to, working with, women, rural businesses, and I would love to take that and turn that into kind of developing a whole ecosystem to support, those businesses within a community and share some of those services and resources for them, like really just create an ecosystem where they feel supported in what they do and that they've got people that they can reach out to and have support navigating those changes and that growth that they are looking for. And within the nonprofit sector, again, it's a little bit of engagement, it's a little bit of advocacy work, and it's just continuing to work with really amazing organizations that really every day they blow me away with what they do, their capacity to do it, and and I think they're just out making the community, a better place. So in some ways, it's so easy to work to support them.
To have a population that small, have 600 different nonprofits, one gets the sense that there must be a really strong sense of community.
Well, there absolutely is here. Yeah.
That's cool. That's a nice environment to be in. But with that, because, again, entrepreneurs are listening, you and I had a little bit of a conversation about this before. Entrepreneurs, again, like I said, being problem solvers and like to do things, and they have high locus of control, can create a problem that, everyone wants to jump out and start their own nonprofit or start their own charity because look and see what I did. But that often leads to like a lot of nonprofits playing in the same field, competing with each other for donor dollars and even competing to program and, offer programs. So two thoughts on this. One, just, talk a little about the risk of that. And what's an alternative for people who do want to do good and have a lot of ideas and energy to bring, but maybe, just starting your own isn't necessarily the ideal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we do see that both in the, the business and the nonprofit sector, and it for sure is a reality. I think, in terms of solutions, I think a lot of it is just relationship building. So when relationships are really strong and those conversations are happening, I think there's the ability to kind of just learn about the potential. So there's a group of 3 senior organizations that came together last year, and they are looking at amalgamating And, there's a lot of hesitation in that process, but they're also realizing that actually it could, create one really strong organization that actually enhances the programs and services that are offered to seniors rather than, limits that. And so I think some of those conversations will be, just really exciting to be a part of in the coming years. But I think when there's trust built within the sector, that's when those conversations will flow. And when there is a, kind of fight for, all the dollars within a small kind of funding pool, it's where, people, just want to focus on, getting their dollars that they need for their programs versus really, again, stepping back and looking at, the programs that are offered and how those could be enhanced. So,
right. Yeah. Now, you're also a B Corp. It's right there on the little sign beside you. And you were, if I'm not mistaken, you were the first in the North to be a B Corp. Is that right?
Yes, the first in Canada's North, and maybe still the only.
Oh, is that right? And that's not just Yukon. That's like everywhere in the North. Is that right?
Yeah, the 3 territories. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was a surprise to discover when we became a B Corp and realized we were, standing on our own in the North. But it's a really exciting community to be part of.
And what made you want to do that? Like, if it wasn't a competitive advantage per se, because getting a B Corp isn't an easy thing. It's no small feat. What was the impetus behind doing that?
I think from the moment that I heard about the B Corp certification, it just resonated with me. I really believe in being a business that is well-rounded in terms of, environmental, social, and community impact. And I, was wanting to just go through the process and understand that a bit more. So it is a very comprehensive process to get the certification, and I really love what it's taught us about, who we are as a company and how we do add value. Because it's easy to say, I work with nonprofit organizations, so I'm just a social, kind of impact company. But we're really clear about how we create impact in the different areas. And I've really loved going through the process and knowing that, having that clarity.
And what's it done for the business? Is it helped operationally, or has it helped with your marketing?
I think, in the North, it doesn't have a big impact. I think relationships are kind of more important than anything else versus, a certification. However, I will say that, once we became a B Corporation, I had the opportunity to, kind of do a presentation during Innovation Week and talk about the process of becoming a B Corporation. And it was amazing how many businesses were interested in it. And I think it actually speaks to, this real kind of interest in being in this world and being recognized for caring about community and social impact. So I think that, I think people want to feel and be seen as someone who cares about our community. And so it's, it's not this, the interest is not surprising how many businesses are interested in becoming B Corp. And while it won't be, kind of an area that we dive into to sort of like have a paid service that, supports organizations, it would be a pleasure for me as a business mentor to, talk any business through and kind of share our knowledge and share, the documentation that we've created or, the processes that we've put in place, because I'd really love to just share that out.
And in your In your growth of your business, are you committed to retaining or staying within the Yukon, or do you want to expand across the north or even go south? Like, when you said, what you wanted to grow and help more organizations, what does that look like with you? Is it contained within your current geography, or are you going to take over the world?
I mean, yeah, who doesn't want to take over the world?
There's a
if
song.
Only I was in charge. No, I do see, again, going back to kind of this system and this structure that we really want to build, and this team of, professionals who can kind of provide these wraparound supports to a nonprofit and kind of just help them thrive at all the different levels. I would love to take that across the country, and roll that out beyond the Yukon. And I think actually working in a jurisdiction that is small and supported, I think actually is a great place to kind of trial something out, look at scale, build that and then roll it out nationally. I think as a kind of pilot project, we are the perfect location for that. But it takes a lot of commitment, and part of it is that I would need to let go of some of the work that I'm doing with individual organizations, and I just need to find that balance. So that is a little bit of my quest, is figuring out the right growth plan that works for me and where I'm at.
Now, does that is it difficult to find people who can do the work? Is that a constraint?
It is somewhat. We are, I think, more challenged than most places in terms of finding staff. But I will say, again, in the context of the post-COVID world, what I love is that, remote teams are absolutely, possible, and in some cases are thriving across the country. So that does allow for that possibility. Yeah.
And as you're pursuing this growth, who do you learn from? Like, you're mentoring other people, but everyone, always say you can teach what you've learned, but then to move beyond that, who do you turn around and learn from?
So I feel incredibly lucky to have the mentors that I do. Some of them are business owners from across the country. Some I met, just in like odd locations, and talking to someone at at the foot of a waterfall in BC, and talking businesses, and then we ended up
as one does at the foot of a waterfall.
Yeah. And so that's someone that I still call for advice, and just to have conversations where I learn incredible things. And then there's some there's some great networking that happens within the B Corp community. There's an amazing social impact company. It's called Future of Good, and they're really all about networking change makers across the country. And so there's no shortage of people to learn from and to be inspired by. And even here in the Yukon, every day I'm just kind of blown away by some of the people and what they contribute to the community and what they kind of share with me. So I feel like I'm influenced every day by amazing people.
That's great. It's interesting just listening to you. Like, it's one of the things I've noticed in a lot of, it's not universal, but in a lot of entrepreneurs, that sort of attitude of gratitude is a benefit. I think it connects you to other people in a more authentic way. And people like to help people who are grateful people.
Yeah, I think going back to your first question, I think it helps when you do what you love, and I think it does help to, if you're running a business, oftentimes it is because it's an area of passion, and you just kind of want to lean into it and do more of it, and find a way to make that work financially, to do that for a living. And so I think that does help, us be grateful for what we get to do every day.
So I just have a few rapid fire questions to finish off with. So what's one decision or action that most helps you get where you are?
I think conversations. Yeah, conversations and relationships.
And if you had to do it over again, would you do anything differently?
I think I would have less engagement with government. Which is an exercise in frustration sometimes, and I think I would have kind of just shifted that energy to other things.
Well, that's in the early years. And is that because sometimes, I mean, government can be frustrating, but they're also a source of opportunity too in the social change space, right?
Yeah, I think again, maybe it was just expectation that some of those changes could happen kind of at a bit of a quicker pace, and maybe that was my own kind of false sense of expectation about how to move things along. So I really have learned to just slow down and be adaptable to the pace of change, which I think most of us need to do.
And what's one aspect of a business you've yet to master?
Oh, I would say, maybe that patience for, kind of growing for capacity and not just wanting to do it all now.
Well, that may be the answer to the next question too, because these are the last two questions, which is what's one personal quality that I most had to improve or overcome?
Maybe on this one, I'll shift it and say that I'm also learning as an introvert how to come out of that space for business and for my work and for my team.
That's interesting. Have you found that an obstacle?
Yes, very much. Yeah. So even this past weekend, I was at a native hockey tournament, which is the most incredible event that I've ever been to. It blew me away from start to finish, but it was really incredibly challenging for my introverted soul to be, engaged with that many people for that long a stretch.
Yeah, I bet. It's interesting though. The mythology that entrepreneurs have to be extroverts. I actually have a number of clients who are really successful entrepreneurs who are introverts, but they've learned how to apply their energy, how to bring in other people to support what they do, and really focus on what matters. But because of that sense of focus, like I don't want to spend time on crap that doesn't matter and frivolities. There's a high level of productivity that I find comes from that. So it may not be as, constraining as you may.
Yeah.
And what's one personal quality that most contributed to your success?
I have to say, maybe just a passion for people.
Spoken like an introvert. Oh, that's funny. That's great. Well, listen, you've been really generous with your time and insights. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you?
My website is wisedprojects.com. And we and anywhere in the Yukon.
just ask where's Wendy. They'll send you that way. Well, thank you very much. I wish you continued success and hope to see you expanding across the country soon.
Thank you so much, Warren. It's great to talk to you.
Cheers.